Sarah Chen stared at her reflection in the grimy mirror of the space station's public restroom, wondering how her life had become such a cosmic joke. 26 years old, xenobiology degree from Earth's finest university, and here she was getting ready for a blind date arranged by her well-meaning but completely clueless roommate Zara. "He's perfect for you," Zara had insisted that morning, her forearms gesturing wildly as only a Galaxian could manage. Tall, mysterious, travels a lot for work. Very romantic. What Zara had failed to mention was that Nexus Station's dating pool consisted mainly of smugglers, mercenaries, and various other individuals who operated in the galaxy's legal gray areas. Sarah should have known better than to trust a species whose idea of romance involved ritualistic combat displays. The restaurant Zara had chosen was called the Void's Edge, which should have been Sarah's first warning sign. The second warning sign was the bouncer at the entrance scanning everyone with military-grade detection equipment. The third was the fact that half the patrons were openly carrying weapons that would be illegal in 14 different star systems. Sarah checked her watch, a vintage, Earth timepiece her grandmother had given her. Her date was already 10 minutes late. She ordered a Centauri Blue, a relatively mild cocktail that wouldn't impair her judgment too severely, and tried to blend in with the eclectic crowd of aliens and humans. The station hummed around her with the constant background noise of thousands of beings from across the galaxy going about their business. Nexus Station was a melting pot, a neutral zone where the three major galactic powers maintained an uneasy peace. It was also, according to her research supervisor, a den of thieves and cutthroats. Sarah was beginning to think he might have been understating things. A commotion near the entrance caught her attention. Someone was arguing with the bouncer, their voice carrying over the ambient noise of the restaurant. Sarah couldn't make out the words, but the tone was distinctly human and distinctly irritated. "Look, I'm not carrying anything illegal," the voice was saying. "It's just standard personal protection gear." "Standard for who?" The bouncer, a 7-foot-tall Vorthak with skin like granite, rumbled in response. "This weapon could punch through station hull plating." "Only if you hit the same spot 12 times in rapid succession," the human replied with what sounded like practiced patience. "Look, I'm just here for dinner. I can check it if that makes you feel better." Sarah found herself turning to get a better look at the source of the disturbance. The human in question was indeed tall, as Zara had promised, with dark hair and the kind of lean build that suggested someone who stayed in shape out of necessity rather than vanity. He was wearing a long coat that had seen better decades and boots that looked like they could kick through a bulkhead. What struck her most, though, were his eyes. Even from across the crowded restaurant, she could see they were constantly moving, cataloging exits, potential threats, and escape routes. This was not someone who had spent his life in lecture halls and research laboratories. The bouncer eventually relented, and the man made his way into the restaurant proper. He paused just inside the entrance, those alert eyes scanning the crowd methodically. When his gaze fell on Sarah, sitting alone at her table with her untouched drink, he hesitated for just a moment before heading in her direction. "You wouldn't happen to be Sarah, would you?" he asked as he approached her table. His voice was warm, despite the wariness that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a fusion reactor. "That depends," Sarah replied, gesturing for him to sit. "Are you my mysteriously late blind date, or are you about to ask me to come quietly?" He laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. "A little of both, actually. I'm Marcus Webb. Sorry I'm late. Had to make a quick stop at the security office to verify I wasn't planning to rob the place." "And are you?" Sarah asked, only half joking. "Planning to rob the place, I mean." "Not tonight," Marcus replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Tonight I'm off duty." There was something about the way he said off-duty that made Sarah's scientific mind start asking questions. Before she could voice any of them, though, a server approached their table. The server was human, which was unusual for Nexus Station, and had the kind of nervous energy that suggested someone who had seen too much and preferred to keep their head down. "What can I get you folks?" the server asked, pointedly not making eye contact with Marcus. "Just a Terran whiskey," Marcus said. "Neat." As the server hurried away, Sarah noticed that several other patrons were now paying attention to their table. The attention wasn't hostile exactly, but it was definitely interested. She was beginning to suspect that her date was more well known on the station than his casual demeanor suggested. "So," Sarah said, deciding to address the elephant in the room head-on. What exactly do you do for work? Sarah was a bit vague on the details. Marcus took a long look around the restaurant before answering. I find people, he said finally. Sometimes they want to be found. Sometimes they don't. That's either very romantic or very ominous, Sarah observed. I'm hoping for romantic. Depends on your perspective, Marcus replied. I prefer to think of it as bringing closure to difficult situations. The server returned with Marcus's drink, setting it down quickly and retreating without a word. Marcus took a sip and seemed to relax slightly, though Sarah noticed his eyes never stopped their periodic sweeps of the room. What about you? He asked. Zara mentioned you work in research, but she was pretty vague herself. Xenobiology, Sarah said. I study how different species adapt to extreme environments. Currently, I'm researching how humans are managing to survive and thrive in conditions that should theoretically kill us within minutes. Find any interesting answers? Actually, yes, Sarah said, warming to one of her favorite topics. It turns out humans are remarkably good at not dying when they probably should. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but we're incredibly persistent. Other species give up when conditions become impossible. Humans just get stubborn. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since he'd sat down, it seemed completely genuine. Stubborn is definitely one word for it. Before Sarah could ask what he meant by that, the lights in the restaurant suddenly dimmed to emergency levels, and every conversation in the place died at once. The silence that followed was the kind of quiet that made Sarah's skin crawl. It was the silence of predators suddenly becoming aware of bigger predators in their territory. Every being in the restaurant had gone perfectly still, and she could feel the tension crackling through the air like static electricity before a thunderstorm. Marcus, however, seemed completely unsurprised by this development. He calmly finished his whiskey and set the glass down with deliberate precision. Sarah, he said in a conversational tone that somehow carried clearly in the absolute quiet, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Okay, she whispered, her xenobiology training kicking in as she tried to analyze the behavioral patterns around her. Flight responses were being triggered across multiple species simultaneously, which suggested a threat significant enough to override territorial and predatory instincts. In about 30 seconds, some very unpleasant individuals are going to walk through that door, Marcus continued, his eyes now locked on the restaurant's entrance. They're going to be looking for me, which means they're also going to be interested in anyone I'm talking to. When that happens, I want you to get under this table and stay there until I tell you it's safe. Wait, what? Sarah's scientific mind was having trouble processing this information. What kind of unpleasant individuals? And why are they looking for you? The kind that shoot first and never bother with questions, Marcus replied. And they're looking for me because I found someone they very much didn't want found. Before Sarah could ask any of the dozen questions suddenly crowding her mind, the restaurant's main entrance burst open. 3 figures strode in, and Sarah immediately understood why every other patron had gone silent. The newcomers were Hegemony Enforcement, the galaxy's most feared peacekeeping force, and they moved with the predatory grace of apex hunters. The lead enforcer was a Vorthak like the bouncer, but where the bouncer had been merely large and intimidating, this one radiated lethal purpose. The other 2 were species Sarah didn't immediately recognize, but their body language suggested they were equally dangerous. Marcus Webb, the lead enforcer, announced, his voice carrying easily through the silent restaurant. By order of the Hegemony Council, you are under arrest for interference with official business and harboring fugitive criminals. Marcus sighed and stood up slowly, hands visible and empty. Evening, Thax. Still taking orders from politicians, I see. Still pretending you're one of the good guys, I see, the enforcer replied. Where is she, Webb? Where is who? Marcus asked with innocent confusion that fooled absolutely no one. Sarah, meanwhile, was trying to process what she was witnessing. Her quiet research date had just transformed into what appeared to be a standoff between her mysteriously charming companion and representatives of Galactic law enforcement. The rational part of her mind was screaming that she should follow Marcus's advice and hide under the table. The larger part of her mind, however, was absolutely fascinated by the social dynamics playing out before her. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Thax continued, human xenobiologist, wanted for theft of classified research materials and violation of the non-interference protocols. Our sources indicate you made contact with her 3 days ago. The mention of Dr. Vasquez made Sarah's blood run cold. Elena Vasquez was a legend in xenobiology circles, a researcher whose work on adaptive evolution had revolutionized the field. She was also, according to recent news reports, a fugitive who had stolen critical research data and disappeared into the outer systems. Never heard of her, Marcus said, but Sarah caught something in his expression that suggested otherwise. One of the other enforcers, a creature that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts of several different predatory species, stepped forward. We have video evidence of you meeting with her on Kepler Station. You were seen transferring data chips. I meet a lot of people, Marcus replied. I transfer a lot of data chips. It's what happens when you work in information acquisition. Sarah's mind was racing. Information acquisition? That was a euphemistic way of saying bounty hunter. Her blind date wasn't just someone who found people. He was someone who hunted people for money. And apparently he'd been hunting Dr. Vasquez. Enough games, Tax rumbled. You will come with us for questioning. Resist and we will be forced to use non-lethal restraints. Marcus glanced around the restaurant, his gaze taking in the positions of all three enforcers, the locations of the exits, and the potential for collateral damage. When his eyes met Sarah's, she saw something she hadn't expected. Regret. I'm sorry about this, he said quietly. This wasn't how I planned for the evening to go. Are you surrendering? Sarah asked, surprised by her own disappointment. Marcus smiled, and suddenly his entire demeanor changed. The casual, slightly apologetic man she'd been talking to vanished, replaced by someone who radiated the kind of controlled danger she'd only read about in field reports from hostile environments. Not exactly, he said. What happened next occurred so quickly that Sarah's eyes could barely follow it. Marcus threw himself sideways, using their table as cover as he drew a weapon that definitely hadn't been visible when he'd been arguing with the bouncer. The restaurant erupted into chaos as other patrons either dove for cover or drew their own weapons, apparently deciding that the presence of hegemony enforcement was a greater threat than whatever Marcus might have done. Energy blasts began flying across the restaurant, accompanied by the distinctive whine of charged particle weapons and the deeper rumble of plasma cannons. Sarah found herself under the table, as Marcus had suggested, but instead of cowering, she was observing the tactical situation with the same analytical detachment she'd used to study a particularly interesting ecosystem. The three enforcers had superior firepower and training, but they were outnumbered by the restaurant's other patrons, many of whom apparently had their own reasons for avoiding hegemony attention. Marcus was using the chaos to his advantage, moving between cover points with a fluidity that suggested extensive combat experience. What impressed Sarah most, though, was that despite being armed with a weapon capable of serious damage, Marcus wasn't actually trying to kill anyone. His shots were precisely aimed to disable equipment and create distractions rather than cause casualties. Even in the middle of what appeared to be a firefight, he was showing restraint. The battle was brief but intense. When the energy discharges finally stopped, two of the enforcers were down but apparently alive, and Thax was pinned behind an overturned table, his weapon damaged and useless. Marcus appeared beside Sarah's hiding spot, extending a hand to help her up. We need to leave, he said urgently. Now, where are we going? Sarah asked, taking his hand and allowing him to pull her to her feet. Anywhere but here, Marcus replied, because in about 5 minutes this place is going to be crawling with backup enforcers, and they won't be interested in taking prisoners. As they made their way toward what appeared to be a service exit, Sarah couldn't help but notice that Marcus was limping slightly, and there was a scorch mark on his coat that hadn't been there before. Are you hurt? She asked. I've been worse, he replied. The question is, are you coming with me, or do you want to stay and explain to hegemony enforcement why you were having dinner with a wanted man? Sarah looked back at the chaos of the restaurant, then at Marcus, who, despite everything that had just happened, was still looking at her with those same warm, intelligent eyes. Dr. Vasquez, she said suddenly. You didn't just find her, did you? You helped her escape. Marcus paused at the exit door, his hand on the opening mechanism. What makes you say that? Because, Sarah said, her mind putting together pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. Someone who really wanted to turn in Elena Vasquez wouldn't have been carrying non-lethal weapons. And someone who was just doing a job wouldn't have risked his life to avoid casualties in that firefight. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the distinct impression she was being evaluated according to criteria she didn't fully understand. "You're very observant," he said finally. "That's either going to be very useful or very dangerous." "For who?" Sarah asked. "For everyone," Marcus replied and opened the door to reveal the maintenance corridors that ran through the bowels of Nexus Station. The maintenance corridors beneath Nexus Station were a maze of pipes, conduits, and service walkways that hummed with the constant background noise of a space station supporting over 2 million inhabitants. The air was thick with the smell of recycled atmosphere and industrial lubricants, and the lighting was sporadic at best. Marcus moved through the narrow passages with the confidence of someone who had clearly spent time learning the station's layout. Sarah followed, her mind still processing everything that had happened in the past 10 minutes. Her quiet evening had transformed into something that felt like the opening chapter of the adventure novels she'd read as a child. "How long have you been planning this route?" she asked as they navigated around a particularly large atmospheric processing unit. "Since I agreed to meet you for dinner," Marcus replied without turning around. "I always scout multiple exit strategies before entering potentially hostile territory." "You considered our date potentially hostile territory?" Marcus paused and looked back at her with a wry smile. "I consider everywhere potentially hostile territory. It's kept me alive this long." They reached what appeared to be a maintenance junction where several corridors converged. Marcus checked a small device that looked like a cross between a scanner and a compass before choosing the left-hand passage. "Marcus," Sarah said as they continued walking, "I need to understand what's happening here. Who is Elena Vasquez really, and why are you protecting her?" "Dr. Vasquez," Marcus said after a moment's consideration, "discovered something the hegemony doesn't want the galaxy to know about. Something about human adaptive capabilities that threatens the current power structure." "What kind of discovery?" Sarah's scientific curiosity was now fully engaged despite the circumstances. "According to Elena, humans aren't just good at surviving in hostile environments," Marcus explained, pausing to check around a corner before continuing. "We're getting better at it. Actively, rapidly better. Each generation is showing increased resistance to radiation, improved efficiency in low-oxygen environments, and enhanced recovery from injuries that should be permanently disabling." Sarah felt her heart rate increase, and not from the physical exertion of navigating the maintenance corridors. That's impossible. Evolutionary adaptation doesn't work that fast. It takes thousands of generations to see changes that significant. "Unless," Marcus said, "the changes aren't evolutionary. Unless there's something else entirely." Before Sarah could ask what he meant by that, her scientific training kicked in with a disturbing possibility. "Are you suggesting that human adaptation is artificial? That someone or something is deliberately enhancing our species?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus replied. "But Elena's research indicates that human survival rates in hostile environments have improved by over 300% in the past 50 years. That's not natural selection. That's engineering." They had reached what appeared to be a cargo loading area. Marcus led her to a section where several shipping containers were stacked, creating a maze of hiding spots and alternative routes. The space was dimly lit and filled with the echo of distant machinery. "The hegemony has been suppressing Elena's research because they don't want other species to know that humans might be becoming something more than what we appear to be," Marcus continued, settling into a position where he could watch the approaches to their hiding spot. "If the galaxy realized that humanity was being actively enhanced by unknown forces, it would panic the major powers." Sarah leaned against a shipping container, her mind racing through the implications. "Enhanced by who? And why?" "Those," Marcus said, "are the questions that are going to get a lot of people killed." The sound of boots on metal grating echoed through the cargo area, approaching from multiple directions. Marcus tensed, drawing his weapon and motioning for Sarah to stay quiet. "They're conducting a systematic search," he whispered, "professional and thorough. We need to move." As they prepared to leave their temporary hiding spot, Sarah's scientific mind was still processing what Marcus had told her. Enhanced humans, artificial evolution, unknown forces manipulating the development of her species. It sounded like something out of a conspiracy theory. But the evidence was apparently compelling enough that the hegemony was willing to hunt down researchers to suppress it. "Marcus," she whispered as they began moving between the shipping containers, If humans really are being enhanced, wouldn't that be a good thing? Isn't survival always better than extinction? Depends on the cost, Marcus replied grimly. And depends on who's paying it. They reached the edge of the cargo area, where a service lift provided access to the upper levels of the station. Marcus paused, checking his scanner again before calling the lift. Where are we going? Sarah asked. To see Elena, Marcus said. She's been hiding in the research sector, working on a way to prove her theories without getting everyone killed in the process. She's still on the station? Sarah was shocked. The most wanted fugitive in the galaxy is hiding on Nexus Station? Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight, Marcus said as the lift arrived, especially when you're hiding among 30,000 other researchers. As they rode the lift to the research levels, Sarah found herself studying Marcus more carefully. Everything about him suggested someone who lived on the edges of society, but his knowledge of xenobiology and his obvious respect for Elena's work indicated an education and intelligence that went beyond simple bounty hunting. You're not just a bounty hunter, are you? She said. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been surprise. What makes you say that? The way you talk about Elena's research, the way you understand the implications of what she's discovered, the fact that you're risking your life to protect a scientist instead of turning her in for what's probably a very large reward. The lift reached their destination, and Marcus was quiet for a moment as they exited into a corridor lined with research laboratories. The area was much cleaner and brighter than the maintenance levels, but it felt oddly deserted for what should have been a busy research facility. I used to be a researcher myself, Marcus said finally. Xenobiology, like you. Like Elena. I studied how different species adapted to the challenges of galactic civilization. Used to be, until I discovered that some of my research was being used to develop biological weapons, Marcus replied. Weapons specifically designed to target the adaptive mechanisms that made certain species successful in hostile environments. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the recycled air. Weapons designed to counter adaptive advantages. To make species more vulnerable rather than more capable. Exactly. I left the research community and became what I am now because sometimes the only way to protect important scientific work is to operate outside the system that's supposed to protect it. They had reached a section of the research level that appeared to be abandoned. Many of the laboratories were dark, their equipment covered with dust sheets. Marcus led her to one particular lab and knocked on the door in what was clearly a predetermined pattern. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with graying hair and intense dark eyes. She looked at Marcus with obvious relief, then at Sarah with curiosity and suspicion. You brought someone, Elena Vasquez said. It wasn't quite an accusation, but it wasn't quite not an accusation either. Sarah Chen, Marcus said by way of introduction, xenobiologist. She figured out most of what we've been talking about on her own. Elena studied Sarah with the kind of analytical gaze that Sarah recognized from her own mentors. Dr. Chen, I've read your work on environmental adaptation mechanisms. Impressive theoretical framework, though I think your conclusions about human resilience are somewhat conservative. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah said, trying to maintain professional composure despite the surreal circumstances. I have to ask about your research. Marcus has told me some things, but I need to understand what you've actually discovered. Elena looked at Marcus, who nodded. Show her, he said. She needs to see the data. Elena stepped aside, allowing them to enter the laboratory. What Sarah saw inside made her question everything she thought she knew about human evolution, galactic politics, and the nature of consciousness itself. The laboratory was a chaos of scientific equipment, data displays, and research materials that spoke of urgent, around-the-clock work. Multiple holographic displays showed complex genetic sequences, environmental adaptation charts, and what appeared to be real-time monitoring data from thousands of subjects. Across dozens of star systems, Elena moved to the central display and activated a three-dimensional model that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. It was a genetic map of human DNA, but unlike any she'd ever seen. Sections of the genetic code were highlighted in different colors, and as she watched, she could see them actively changing, adapting, evolving in real time. This is impossible, Sarah whispered, moving closer to examine the data. Genetic adaptation doesn't happen this quickly. These changes should take millennia, not years. That's what I thought too, Elena said, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had been working at the edge of her capabilities for months. Until I started tracking human survivors from hostile environment incidents across the past century, she gestured. And the display shifted to show survival statistics that made Sarah's scientific worldview crack at its foundations. Humans exposed to lethal radiation levels not only survived but showed improved resistance to subsequent exposure. Individuals subjected to oxygen-poor environments developed more efficient respiratory systems within months, rather than generations. Most remarkably, humans injured in ways that should have caused permanent disability were recovering completely and showing enhanced resistance to similar injuries. The adaptation rate is accelerating, Elena continued. What used to take decades now happens in years. What used to take years now happens in months, and in some cases we're seeing real-time adaptation occurring during the actual exposure to hostile conditions. Marcus was watching Sarah's reaction carefully. Elena's research indicates that the acceleration isn't random. It's following patterns that suggest intentional guidance. Guidance by whom? Sarah asked, though part of her was beginning to suspect the answer. Elena activated another display, this one showing brain scans of human subjects during adaptive episodes. The changes are being coordinated by modifications to the human neural network, specifically by the activation of dormant neural pathways that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of human brain development. Sarah studied the brain scans with growing amazement and horror. The highlighted neural pathways formed patterns that were clearly artificial in origin, but they were integrated so seamlessly with natural human brain structure that they appeared to have always been there. Someone has been modifying human beings at the genetic and neural level, she said, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. We're being turned into something else and we don't even know it's happening. Not all humans, Elena corrected. The modifications appear to be triggered by exposure to specific types of stress or hostile environments. It's as if there's a dormant enhancement system that activates when needed. But activated by what? Sarah asked. And more importantly, why? Before Elena could answer, an alarm began sounding throughout the research level. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the laboratory in harsh red light, and automated announcements began echoing through the corridors. Attention all personnel. The research sector is now under hegemony security lockdown. All individuals are to remain in their current locations for mandatory identification verification. Marcus moved to the laboratory's security monitors, which showed armed hegemony forces systematically searching each research facility. They've expanded the search. Elena, we need to move your data. Already done, Elena replied, holding up a small storage device. Everything is backed up and ready for transmission. The question is where to send it. Sarah was still processing the enormity of what she'd learned when a thought occurred to her. Dr. Vasquez, have you considered that the modifications might not be malicious? That someone might be preparing humanity for challenges we haven't encountered yet? Elena looked at her with surprise. What do you mean? Think about it, Sarah continued, her scientific training helping her organize the implications. Every enhancement you've documented improves human survival in hostile environments. Radiation resistance, improved oxygen efficiency, enhanced healing. Those aren't modifications for conquest. Those are modifications for exploration and survival in places that would normally kill us. Marcus was monitoring the hegemony search progress when something in Sarah's words caught his attention. You think someone is preparing humans for something specific? I think, Sarah said slowly, someone is preparing humans to survive in environments that don't exist yet, or that we haven't discovered yet. Elena stared at her for a moment, then began rapidly accessing different data sets. You might be right. Look at this. She displayed a map of human expansion across the galaxy over the past 2 centuries. Human colonies have been established in locations that should be completely uninhabitable, places where other species can't survive even with advanced technology. And yet humans are not only surviving there, they're thriving, Sarah observed, because we're being enhanced to handle exactly those conditions. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor outside interrupted their discussion. Marcus checked his weapons and moved to cover the laboratory's entrance. Company's coming. Elena, get that data transmitted now. To where? Elena asked, her fingers flying over the transmission controls. Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. To my research supervisor on Earth, Dr. James Harrison at the Xenobiology Institute. If this information needs to reach the human government, he'll know how to do it properly. As Elena began the transmission, the footsteps in the corridor grew louder and more numerous. Marcus positioned himself where he could defend the laboratory entrance. But all three of them knew that against a full hegemony security team, their options were limited. Transmission complete, Elena announced. The data is on its way to Earth. Good, Marcus said grimly. Because I don't think we're going to make it off this station. Sarah found herself experiencing something she'd never felt before. A complete certainty about what she needed to do, combined with skills and knowledge she didn't remember acquiring. It was as if some dormant part of her mind was suddenly awakening, providing her with tactical awareness and strategic thinking capabilities that went far beyond her scientific training. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying a new confidence that surprised all three of them.
What's the security classification on the research data Elena just transmitted?
Highest possible, Marcus replied. Why? Because, Sarah said, moving to the laboratory's communication system. I'm going to invoke Protocol 7. Elena and Marcus both stared at her. Protocol 7 was a legendary safeguard in galactic law, supposedly created to protect research that was vital to the survival of sentient species. Most people believed it was a myth. Sarah, Elena said carefully, Protocol 7 requires authorization from a recognized government representative and verification of species-threatening circumstances. I know, Sarah replied. Beginning to access communication channels she somehow knew how to reach. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, authorized representative of Earth Xenobiology Institute, and I'm declaring that the suppression of this research constitutes a direct threat to human survival and development. As she spoke, something extraordinary happened. Her voice carried with an authority that seemed to resonate on frequencies beyond normal human hearing. The station's communication systems amplified her declaration, broadcasting it not just through Nexus Station but across the entire sector. The footsteps in the corridor stopped. A moment later, the emergency lockdown alarms shut off, and the station's normal lighting returned. Attention Hegemony Security Forces, came an announcement from the station's central command. Protocol 7 has been invoked for the research sector. All enforcement actions are suspended pending review by the Galactic Council. Marcus and Elena were staring at Sarah as if she had suddenly sprouted wings. How did you know how to do that? Elena asked. Sarah looked at her hands, which were still tingling with an energy she couldn't explain. I have absolutely no idea, she said honestly. But I think we just proved your point about human enhancement. The aftermath of Sarah's protocol. 7 declaration created an eerie calm throughout the research sector. The hegemony forces had withdrawn to a minimum safe distance, but their presence could still be felt like pressure before a storm. In the laboratory, the 3 humans found themselves in the strange position of being simultaneously protected by galactic law and hunted by its enforcers. Elena was the first to break the silence. Sarah, what you just did should have been impossible. Protocol 7 requires not just authorization, but species recognition codes that are classified at the highest levels of government. I'm starting to think, Sarah replied, studying her hands as if they belonged to someone else, that there are a lot of things about human capabilities that we don't understand yet. Marcus was monitoring the communication channels, tracking the station-wide response to the Protocol 7 invocation. Whatever you did, it's working. The Galactic Council has issued a temporary suspension of all enforcement actions related to Elena's research. We've got maybe 12 hours before they figure out a way around it. 12 hours to do what? Elena asked. To prove that human enhancement isn't a threat to galactic stability, Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure where that certainty was coming from. To show them that whoever is guiding our development is preparing us for something important, not turning us into conquerors. Elena pulled up another set of data displays, these showing human expansion patterns across the galaxy over the past 2 centuries. Look at where humans have established colonies. Worlds that other species avoid because of hostile conditions. Radiation-soaked planets around unstable stars. Worlds with toxic atmospheres. Even space stations in regions where most species can't survive without extensive life support. And in every case, Marcus added, human settlements not only survive but become thriving communities within a few generations. Sarah studied the expansion patterns with her enhanced analytical capabilities. Something about the distribution of human colonies was nagging at her scientific mind. Elena, can you overlay this expansion data with galactic survey maps? Specifically, maps showing unexplored regions and areas marked as too dangerous for systematic exploration? As Elena made the adjustments, a pattern began to emerge that made all three of them fall silent. Human expansion wasn't random. It was creating a network of habitable zones that formed corridors leading directly toward the most dangerous and unexplored regions of the galaxy. "We're being prepared for something specific," Sarah said, the certainty in her voice surprising even her. "Human colonies are being positioned to support exploration and settlement of areas that no other species can survive in." "But why?" Marcus asked. "What's out there that requires that level of preparation?" Before anyone could answer, the laboratory's communication system activated with an incoming priority transmission. The voice that emerged was distinctly human, but carried harmonics that suggested it was being transmitted across vast distances. "Dr. Chen, Dr. Vasquez, Mr. Webb, my name is Admiral Elena Torres, commander of the Earth Deep Space Exploration Fleet. We need to talk." Elena looked at Marcus and Sarah with confusion. "There is no deep space exploration fleet. Earth's military doesn't have the technology for deep space operations beyond the local sector. There are a lot of things about Earth's capabilities that aren't public knowledge," the voice continued, apparently able to hear their conversation. "Dr. Chen, your invocation of Protocol 7 has accelerated our timeline considerably. We need you to bring Dr. Vasquez's research data to coordinates that I'm transmitting to you now." A star chart appeared on the laboratory's display, showing a location in the Outer Rim territories that was marked as unexplored space. "Admiral Torres," Sarah said, speaking directly to the communication system, "what's happening out there? What are humans being prepared for?" "Something that will determine whether our species survives the next phase of galactic evolution," Torres replied. "Dr. Vasquez's research has confirmed what we've suspected for decades. The enhancements to human adaptive capabilities aren't being directed by any terrestrial organization. They're being guided by something we encountered in deep space, something that's been waiting for humanity to develop the capability to survive contact." Marcus was already moving toward the laboratory's equipment storage, gathering gear for what was obviously going to be a departure from the station. "Admiral, what kind of contact are we talking about?" "First contact with a species that makes the current galactic powers look like children playing with toys," Torres said. "They've been monitoring human development for centuries, guiding our enhancement because they need partners who can survive in the environments where they exist." Elena was staring at her research data with new understanding. "The modifications aren't just for survival. They're for communication, neural pathway enhancements that would allow human minds to interface with completely alien forms of consciousness." "Exactly," Torres confirmed. "But the hegemony and the other galactic powers can't know about this yet. If they realized that humanity was being prepared for an alliance that would make us the dominant species in the galaxy, they would unite to destroy us before that alliance could be completed." Sarah felt the enhanced neural pathways in her mind activating more fully, providing her with strategic insights that seemed to come from beyond her own knowledge. "Admiral, the Galactic Council's temporary protection won't last. We need to get Elena's research data to you, but we also need to ensure that the truth about human enhancement reaches the right people on Earth." "Agreed. There's a transport waiting for you in Docking Bay 7. The pilot has been enhanced with the same adaptive modifications you're experiencing. Dr. Chen, he'll be able to get you through hegemony security." As they prepared to leave the laboratory, Marcus paused to look at Sarah. "You realize there's no going back from this, right? Once we leave this station, we're committed to whatever this is." Sarah considered the question seriously. 12 hours ago, she had been a graduate student looking forward to a quiet dinner date. Now she was apparently part of a conspiracy that involved alien contact, human enhancement, and the future evolution of galactic civilization. "Marcus," she said, "I think we've been committed to this since the moment our species started spreading across the galaxy. We just didn't know it yet." Elena finished gathering her research materials and secured the data storage devices that contained her life's work. "There's something else we need to consider. If humans are being enhanced for contact with an advanced alien species, what does that mean for the humans who aren't enhanced? What happens to the rest of our species?" That, Sarah realized with growing clarity, is probably why the enhancements are triggered by exposure to hostile environments. They're not trying to replace baseline humanity. They're trying to create a bridge between baseline humans and something completely alien. As they prepared to leave for the docking bay, the weight of what they were undertaking settled over all three of them. They were carrying information that could transform humanity's understanding of its place in the galaxy. They were also walking into a situation that could determine whether their species survived the next phase of galactic evolution. Marcus checked his weapons one final time and moved to the laboratory entrance. Ready? As ready as anyone can be for first contact with beings that make the hegemony look primitive, Sarah replied. Elena shouldered her research equipment and took one last look at the laboratory where she had made discoveries that would change everything. Let's go make history. As they left the research sector and made their way toward Docking Bay 7, none of them noticed the small monitoring device that had been recording their entire conversation, or the fact that their words were already being transmitted to forces that had very different ideas about humanity's future role in the galaxy. The journey through Nexus Station to Docking Bay 7 should have been routine, but Sarah's enhanced awareness was picking up subtle signs that their movements were being monitored. Security cameras tracked them with more precision than random surveillance would account for, and certain corridors seemed to have an unusual number of maintenance workers who watched them with professional interest. "We're being followed," she murmured to Marcus as they waited. "For a transport lift, I know," he replied quietly. "The question is by whom? The hegemony forces are maintaining their distance because of Protocol 7, but that doesn't mean other interested parties are doing the same." Elena was clutching her research materials tightly, her enhanced analytical capabilities apparently providing her with tactical awareness, similar to what Sarah was experiencing. "There are at least 3 different groups tracking us. The movement patterns are too coordinated to be coincidental. When the lift arrived, they found themselves sharing it with a maintenance worker, whose tool belt contained equipment that definitely wasn't standard for station repairs. Marcus positioned himself between the worker and Elena, while Sarah found herself evaluating potential escape routes with skills she was certain she hadn't possessed yesterday. The maintenance worker smiled pleasantly and exited at the commercial level, but not before placing a small device on the lift's control panel. As soon as the doors closed, the device activated, and the lift began moving toward a destination that definitely wasn't Docking Bay 7. "Emergency override," Marcus said, examining the device. "Military grade. We're being hijacked." Sarah's enhanced neural pathways were suddenly providing her with technical knowledge about station systems that she had never studied. Without conscious thought, she accessed the lift's manual controls and began rerouting their destination. "How do you know how to do that?" Elena asked, watching Sarah manipulate systems with practiced efficiency. "I don't know," Sarah replied honestly, her hands working independently of her conscious mind. "It's like the information is just there when I need it." The lift shuddered and changed direction, now heading toward Docking Bay 7 as originally intended. However, their unauthorized course correction had apparently triggered security alerts throughout the station. "Attention passengers in Lift 7 Alpha," came an announcement from the station's central command. "Please remain calm while security personnel assist with a technical malfunction." "Technical malfunction," Marcus said dryly, checking his weapon. "That's one way to describe it." When the lift doors opened at the docking level, they were greeted by the sight of multiple security teams positioned throughout the bay. However, these weren't hegemony forces. The uniforms and equipment suggested private military contractors, the kind employed by powerful individuals or organizations that operated outside official government oversight. "Dr. Vasquez," called a voice from the security team's apparent leader, a human woman whose bearing suggested significant military experience. "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez, representing parties interested in ensuring your research reaches the appropriate authorities." Elena stepped protectively in front of her research materials. "And which authorities would those be, Colonel?" "Parties who believe that information about human enhancement should be controlled by humans, not by aliens with unknown agendas," Martinez replied. "Your research could give humanity the advantage we need to claim our rightful place as the dominant species in the galaxy." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach as she realized what they were facing. These weren't agents of galactic stability or alien contact. These were human supremacists who wanted to weaponize Elena's discoveries. "Colonel Martinez," Sarah said, stepping forward with authority she didn't know she possessed. The research data indicates that human enhancement is being guided by beings who want partnership, not conquest. Attempting to use these enhancements for dominance would violate the trust of species whose technological capabilities far exceed our
own. Martinez studied Sarah with the calculating
gaze of someone evaluating a potential threat. Dr. Chen, isn't it? Your invocation of Protocol 7 was impressive, but it also revealed capabilities that suggest you've been more extensively enhanced than most humans. That makes you either a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. Marcus was quietly positioning himself for action when the situation took an unexpected turn. The lights in the docking bay suddenly dimmed, and a low harmonic tone began resonating through the station's structure. The tone wasn't audible in the traditional sense, but Sarah could feel it activating neural pathways throughout her enhanced nervous system. "What is that?" Elena whispered, her research equipment beginning to register energy signatures that shouldn't have been possible with current technology. The answer came from an unexpected source. The station's communication system activated, but instead of human voices or known alien languages, what emerged was something that bypassed auditory processing entirely and spoke directly to enhanced human consciousness. "This is inappropriate," the communication said, though it wasn't really words or sounds. "The enhanced humans are not ready for factional conflict. The preparation phase is incomplete." Colonel Martinez and her security team suddenly found themselves unable to move, not because of any visible restraint, but because their nervous systems had simply stopped responding to voluntary control. Only Sarah, Marcus, and Elena remained mobile, their enhanced neural pathways apparently providing immunity to whatever was affecting the others. The beings Admiral Torres mentioned, Sarah realized. "They're here. On the station. Not here," the communication continued. "Nearby. Observing. The Human Enhancement Project requires careful guidance to prevent premature militarization." Elena was recording everything with her research equipment, her scientific excitement overriding the potential danger of their situation. "This is unprecedented. Direct neural communication with a non-human intelligence. The implications for consciousness research alone." "Dr. Vasquez," the alien presence interrupted gently, "your research has been invaluable, but it represents only a small fraction of what you need to understand. The enhancement of human capabilities is part of a preparation process for challenges that your species cannot yet comprehend." Marcus, meanwhile, was studying the immobilized security team with professional interest. "How long will they stay like this?" "Until we have departed and you have reached your intended destination," came the reply. Colonel Martinez and her associates represent human factions that would use enhancement technology for conquest, rather than survival. Such use would be counterproductive to long-term species development. A new passage had opened in the docking bay wall, revealing a corridor that definitely hadn't existed moments before. Beyond the corridor, Sarah could sense the presence of a spacecraft that wasn't built according to any known technological principles. "Admiral Torres is waiting," the alien presence informed them. "The next phase of human preparation requires direct contact with enhancement guidance systems. Dr. Chen's spontaneous capability activation indicates that this phase must begin immediately." As they moved toward the newly revealed passage, Elena couldn't resist asking the question that had been driving her research. "What are you preparing us for? What challenge requires these enhancements?" The answer, when it came, changed their understanding of humanity's place in the universe entirely. "The galaxy is dying," the presence explained with calm finality. "Not immediately, but inevitably. The current dominant species lack the adaptive capabilities necessary for survival in the environments that will exist after the transition. Humanity possesses the potential for enhancement that could allow consciousness to survive the change. But only if the enhancement process is completed correctly." Sarah felt the full weight of what they were walking into. They weren't just carrying research data or seeking alien contact. They were potentially carrying the future of consciousness itself through a universe that was ending. "No pressure," Marcus said dryly as they stepped through the passage into technology that would have been indistinguishable from magic just hours before. Behind them, the security team remained frozen and Nexus Station continued its daily operations, unaware that 3 enhanced humans had just stepped into a situation that would determine the fate of every thinking being in the galaxy. The spacecraft beyond the passage defied every principle of engineering Sarah had ever learned. There were no visible walls or floors in the traditional sense, just surfaces that seemed to flow and adjust themselves to accommodate human movement. The air hummed with energy that made her enhanced neural pathways resonate in harmony with systems she couldn't begin to understand. Admiral Torres was waiting for them in what might have been a command center. Though it looked more like a living organism than a technological construct, she was clearly human, but her eyes held depths that suggested exposure to perspectives far beyond normal human experience. Dr. Vasquez, Mr. Webb, Dr. Chen, Torres said, greeting them with a mixture of relief and urgency. I'm sorry we had to accelerate contact like this, but your discovery has forced us to move faster than we'd planned. Elena immediately began recording everything with her research equipment, though Sarah suspected that the data she was collecting would revolutionize several different scientific fields simultaneously. Admiral, the beings that guided us here mentioned that the galaxy is dying. What did they mean by that? Torres gestured, and the space around them transformed into a three-dimensional map of the galaxy that showed energy patterns and stellar evolution data spanning millions of years. The current galactic ecosystem is approaching a transition point. The stars that support current civilization are aging, and the environmental conditions that allow most known species to survive are changing. How long do we have? Marcus asked, his enhanced tactical awareness apparently providing him with strategic insights about galactic-scale challenges. In cosmic terms, not long, Torres replied. Perhaps 50,000 years before the changes become irreversible. In practical terms, we have maybe 1,000 years before species that can't adapt to the new conditions begin facing extinction. Sarah studied the galactic map with her enhanced analytical capabilities, seeing patterns that her unmodified mind would never have been able to process. The human colonies. They're not just positioned for exploration, they're positioned to survive the transition. Exactly, Torres confirmed. The beings who've been guiding human enhancement exist in environments that will be common after the galactic transition. They've been preparing humanity to serve as bridges between the current galactic civilization and whatever emerges from the change. Elena was examining her research data in light of this new information, her enhanced neural pathways allowing her to process connections between adaptation patterns and cosmic-scale environmental changes. The enhancement triggers. They're not just responding to current hostile environments, they're preparing us for conditions that don't exist yet. But why humans? Sarah asked. What makes our species suitable for this kind of enhancement? The answer came not from Torres but from the alien presence that had guided them to the ship. The communication bypassed normal sensory channels entirely, speaking directly to their enhanced consciousness. Humans possess a unique combination of adaptive flexibility and conscious cooperation, the presence explained. Most species develop intelligence to dominate their environment. Humans developed intelligence to adapt to environments they cannot dominate. This makes enhancement possible without destroying essential consciousness patterns. The implications were staggering. Sarah realized they were discussing not just the survival of humanity, but the preservation of consciousness itself through a galactic transition that would eliminate most current forms of life. What about the other species? Marcus asked. The hegemony, the Calaxians, everyone else in current galactic civilization. Are they just going to die? Not if humanity fulfills its role as bridges, Torres replied. Enhanced humans can serve as translators and guides, helping other species develop the adaptive capabilities they'll need to survive. But only if we complete the enhancement process correctly. Elena was studying the technical specifications of the enhancement process, her research background allowing her to understand implications that were both exciting and terrifying. Admiral, the neural pathway modifications required for full enhancement. They're not just additions to human consciousness. They're fundamental changes to how consciousness itself functions. Which brings us to the critical decision point. Torres said gravely, Dr. Chen, your spontaneous capability activation indicates that you're a candidate for full enhancement. The choice of whether to proceed is yours, but you need to understand what's involved. Sarah felt the weight of the decision settling over her like gravity from a massive star. Full enhancement would give her the capabilities needed to help guide humanity through the galactic transition, but it would also fundamentally change what she was as a conscious being. What happens to the person I am now? She asked. That person becomes part of something larger, the alien presence replied. Enhanced consciousness retains all previous memories and personality patterns, but gains access to perspectives that span multiple species and temporal scales. You would still be Sarah Chen, but you would also be something more. Marcus was watching her with an expression that mixed admiration, concern, and something that might have been love. Sarah, whatever you decide, you should know that what started as a setup by my well-meaning roommate has become the most important evening of my life. Despite everything they'd learned and experienced, Sarah found herself smiling. Even though it involved gunfights, conspiracy theories, and potential first contact with galaxy-spanning alien intelligence. Especially because of all that, Marcus replied. You've been extraordinary through all of it. Elena looked up from her research data with excitement that only a scientist making revolutionary discoveries could display. Sarah, if you choose enhancement, I want to document the process. The data could be invaluable for helping other humans understand what's involved. Sarah looked around at the three people who had become her partners in the most significant moment in human history. Elena, driven by scientific curiosity and the desire to understand. Marcus, committed to protecting important knowledge regardless of personal cost. Admiral Torres, carrying the weight of humanity's future. If I choose enhancement, Sarah said slowly, what happens to the people I care about? To the relationships I've built? They become part of a larger network of consciousness, Torres explained. Enhanced humans maintain individual identity while gaining access to collective knowledge and perspective. The person you are doesn't disappear. She becomes part of something that can help preserve everything valuable about human consciousness through the galactic transition. Sarah felt her enhanced neural pathways activating more fully as she considered the decision. The choice wasn't just about her own future. It was about whether humanity would have the guidance needed to fulfill its role as bridges between current galactic civilization and whatever emerged from the coming change. I need to ask one more question, she said. This enhancement process, will other humans be able to choose it as well? Those who are suitable candidates will have the opportunity, the alien presence confirmed. But the process requires voluntary acceptance and psychological preparation. It cannot be forced or imposed. Sarah looked at Marcus, who was watching her with complete trust in whatever decision she made. She looked at Elena, whose research had revealed the truth about human potential. She looked at Admiral Torres, who carried the hopes of their entire species. I'll do it, she said simply. Not just for humanity, but for every conscious being that might not survive the transition without help. As the enhancement process began, Sarah felt her consciousness expanding to encompass perspectives she had never imagined possible. She remained herself, but herself as part of something infinitely larger and more wonderful than she had ever dreamed. The blind date that had started as a simple setup had become the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure. And somehow, in the middle of galactic conspiracy and cosmic transformation, she had found exactly what she hadn't known she was looking for. 6 months later, as enhanced humans began working with other species to prepare for the galactic transition, Sarah and Marcus were still discovering new aspects of consciousness, love, and the infinite possibilities that opened when two people chose to face the unknown together. The galaxy was changing, but humanity was ready to help guide that change toward something that preserved the best of what had come before, while embracing the wonders that lay ahead.